Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, for all the frogs in my throat. It's a pleasure to be here alongside Edward May again. The story of the lion tamer, that is Edward May, and the domestic cat, that is myself, Hasse Rømer. It's a pleasure to be here once again, another Sunday. Here on the virtual racing compound. That is my normal voice back. That is all back to all good. And Edward, the first endurance round of the season here at Monza. We've got an hour and a half of racing coming up. What's not to like?
Yeah, this is going to be very exciting. We're just into the first few stages of qualifying, a 15-minute qualifying session, same as Interlagos. Stuck into it immediately, and the first times have just started to come through here, Hasse. Gaston Maceroni, top of the timing sheets here yet again. P1 by a decent margin there, but that's quickly bested by Martin de Jong, who goes just a couple hundredths faster. This is in the early stages of qualifying. Time of day in the sim is very early in the morning, so you can see that nice orange hue of sunrise. Does of course mean that the track will start to hot up as the race wears on. Drivers will most likely look to try and make the tyres last the whole way through the race. Save a bit of time. Tyre changes taking around about 25 seconds, although they have been changed recently in the new iRacing update. I think they're more in line with about 20 seconds for a tyre change, if memory serves correct. So we might see drivers try some alternate strategies here at Monza.
Yeah, we'll have to see about the tires. It's an hour and a half at 25 degrees here as we are early in the morning for the session. We would not really be expecting it to be heating up that considerably from here. Maybe. The hotter it'll get, the harder it's going to become for the drivers to keep it alive on the rubber they have underneath them. So we'll have to see. It could be the decider in the end. But close callings at the moment in Pro. Alfredo Tricarici quickest at the moment in AM. Another of the dominant Coanda drivers at the moment, you could say, because they're at the lead. Well, I was just about to say that, but we've actually got Martin de Jong in another BMW, but it's certainly BMW being all BM dominant. Could you say that, Edward? I'm sorry, I'm gonna give myself the yellow card and show myself out.
Yeah, it seems like that at the moment, but this is the early stage. Not many of the other drivers have got any lap times. I mean, none of the drivers in the Ferraris have set a time yet, and you'd expect the Ferraris to be doing well here, being their home race. The Italian Stallions looking to be getting as many of their prancing horses applied around Monza. You can see Andy Spicer going fourth fastest in the AM class. Currently on board with the car top of the AM class though, Alfredo Tricarici for Coanda Racing. Just watching some more of the times start to come through. I mean, Martin de Jong has been pretty quick around here, purple sectors recently, but I think that his last lap was invalidated. It was a 46.33. Much faster than his 46.83, but not a valid lap time there, Hasse.
No, and that's all a part of it. So easy to get those off tracks, coming off so many of these fast corner exits, really trying to maximize the track altogether. As we're on board with Alfredo Tricarici, still on top of the AM standings as he makes his way through the double right-hander that are the Lesmos. And just having a look at the results from last week out, it was indeed Remco Barlow making it a 1, 2, 3, 4 Coanda Racing. And we were slightly confused about that last time out, but it is indeed a Coanda car there that Remco Barlow drives. That should be all fixed in the graphics as well for tonight. But a win for Gaston Maceroni, Martin de Jong and himself on the front row at the moment. And we'll see just how that stands in 7 more minutes or so when we have the checkered flag here in qualifying. Another flying lap comes to an end here for Alfredo Tricarici, and we'll see whether or not it's going to be an improvement. I don't think so. Certainly doesn't look
to be. Only a couple hundred shy there, Hasse. His best lap was a 46.85. That last lap was a 46.88. So not quite enough but still in the realms, and you can see that he's doing the laps very consistently, which shows his level of pace. Same with Martin de Jong, actually, his laps have been very consistently the same as well. Another 46.83 from the, we would imagine, Dutchman. Martin de Jong not quite showing up on our graphics as such, but that should be getting fixed. Independent driver, but a driver that I have enjoyed some great battles with in recent weeks. Again, in the World GT Championships in our AM class, had an amazing tussle at Daytona with that man. He's looking to have that same level of pace here in Monza. Very rapid and probably actually getting a nice healthy toe. Purple, sector 2 and 3 on this. Like we've just seen him coming out of Ascaria now into the final corner. Can he get it all hooked up nicely? Kissing the apex, getting on the throttle, just running wide enough to keep it within the white lines. And then as tight as you like, in towards the start-finish line. What will it be for Martin de Jong? Breaks the timing beam and goes much faster. For some reason, my overlay glitched out just a touch, but I can tell you it was a 1 minute 46.53 his lap time. 0.3 of a second quicker than this man, Gaston Maceroni.
Who's leading out a train of Coanda cars here. As they make it through Ascari, that might have held up the bunch there.
They are all on our laps, but they need to get out of the way of this Mercedes that's going to be parting the waters.
Like Moses, indeed. without getting too sacrilegious here, but
and
the
now
Mercedes
is actually slotting in, interestingly, behind one of his teammates. Maybe he needs a bit of a tow, seeing if that will help him up the order. That's Nicholas Cocato. Memory serves right, Hasse. These two had a pretty tasty fight, though, last time out at Imola. The two Coanda teammates.
Yes, indeed. And very much so with Nicholas Cocato, the reigning champ. They're running out of fuel on the final lap. And there, the Mercedes of was that Cody Steeg? I think that was Bradley Pascoe.
I believe it was Pascoe, yeah. It had the
BDM
22
Racing
on the number board. BDM Racing driver, yeah. Interestingly enough, we're not seeing too many of the Mercedes. It was the dominant car in GT3, it's fair to say. The acceleration and straight line speed is absolutely immense in that thing. It just goes from the corners, which is exactly what you need here at Monza, coming out of those two chicanes at the start of the lap. The slow speed acceleration, the top end speed as well at the end of, well, start finish straight, and then the back straight here coming out of the second Lesmo really does help you a lot. Currently with one of the 4 Porsches we have this evening. Brandon Glover, second fastest Porsche, but 4th fastest driver outright in his AM class. Porsche having recent updates in the balance of performance with improvements to its downforce and aero balance, so we should see less of that characteristic sort of slow spins where the rear end just breaks away and there's nothing you can do to save it. It looks to be a little bit more planted in this recent build, and that's translated to lap times as well, with drivers being able to push a little bit more confidently and extract that lap time. So we're going to see what the likes of maybe Craig Durant can do, the independent driver, currently inside the top 10, but only just, as he does sit 10th place, dethroned by the AM driver of Darren Fellows. BDM Racing now leading the AM class there in qualifying. That is a very good lap time indeed by the UK and Ireland driver. Pete Plastow is currently in 9th place and has just been demoted down to 9th place by James Foster, who goes ahead of Matthew Terry. Matthew Terry is a interesting driver, I think, making his debut this season. I don't remember seeing him out and about last time out at Interlagos, but I could be wrong, Hasse.
I think that's pretty correct, if I'm not mistaken. We didn't see him out last week. We did see Darren Fellows very well for himself, not only in the AM standings taking the win, but also finishing quite high up on the overall and really proving himself to be competitive with that part of the field as well. Very consistent drive, which was required, to say the very least, in a, shall we say, relatively chaotic race there last week.
Yeah, and if we can, has to go back to Darren Fellows. He is making his first season in the league and has off to a very good start, as you mentioned, from Interlagos' first season with BDM Racing, with his teammates Brad Pascoe and Matt Maddox, and talking to us in the run-up to the season and between rounds that he's trying to have a good first season, seeing if he can challenge for the AM win. Well, he's been doing pretty much exactly that from the word go. But here at Monza, these endurance races, they are a completely different kettle of fish, as we see now Gaston Maceroni. He's going to come through and try and start his final flying lap.
Flying lap, indeed, the final one, indeed, I was about to say, but it is going to be an attempt at a flying one, though he's pulling his teammate along. Is that Kukato on his tail?
Looks
yes,
to be.
It
did
is
have
indeed.
A very good run, though, out of that first chicane. Hasse got the line perfectly right, using all of the curb on the exit. Looks a little bit thinner than it actually is when you're inside the car, that exit. A lot of drivers too sort of tentative to really use all of the track limits on the exit of turn 2. Same there through the second chicane. Both these two drivers getting it absolutely nailed down, Kukato and Maceroni. And it's translating for Kukato as he's done personal best sector 1, personal best sector 2. Could be a very nice lap for Kukato. Could see him onto the front row ahead of his teammate.
Yeah, and I think he's closing in slowly, using the slipstream to the best that he can. And who is that in the BMW on the tail of these two as well?
Patrick Gannon?
That's Paddy Gannon, yeah. Who's currently in 3rd place there for RPM
Patrick's
Racing.
on a purple sector 3.
Yeah, he's flying at the moment, so watch out for that lap as well. Coming in from Patrick Gannon here as we do have the checkered flag.
Through the final corner they come, getting on the power as early as they dare, and then hugging the tightest line possible up to the start-finish line. Braking timing beams, you can see the lap times that they need to beat on the left-hand side. Kukato does it and gets ahead of his teammate. Patrick Gannon also goes ahead of Gaston Maceroni, so a front row start is all of a sudden a second row start for the man who won last time out at Interlagos, our championship leader. Starting in 4th place, Martin de Jong looking to get his championship back on order after his very late showing and sadly inability to participate fully at Interlagos. He's going to be starting from pole position, though, Hasse.
Absolutely so, and it's going to be quite the comeback there for Martin de Jong, who missed the start by seconds last week. And he was going to be absolutely gutted all the way through for a week's time, I think, and taking a vengeance indeed. You've mentioned his speed in the BMW. He's certainly showing that here tonight on a track that, of course, does suit the BMW very well. So we'll see how long it takes for the sim to tick over as we're awaiting the grid running order. We'll cue the music and make it comfy for you all out there. And by the way,
I think for Patrick Gannon, currently on is in lap after qualifying. Session should come to a close either when he peels off into the pits or in about 25 seconds time. You can just see him now coming up towards the final corner. But it was a good not a practice session, a good qualifying session for the RPM Racing driver. Managing to get himself up onto the second row. But it is BMW locking out the first 2 rows of the grid, Hasse, and that might be a sign of things to come. I wasn't expecting the BMW to be as strong as it is with this new build. For me, I thought the dark horse could be those Porsches, but sadly, not seeing that tonight, are we?
No, we aren't, but what we are seeing is Martin de Jong on pole position, the independent, by 0.2 of a second ahead of Nicolas Kukato. On row 2, it's Patrick Gannon for RPM with Gaston Maceroni, and Charlie Nielsen ahead of Remco Barlow there on row 3. Then James Foster and Matthew Terry with Pete Plasso and AM pole sitter Darren Fellow there in 10th overall. Craig Durand in 11th ahead of Cody Steek. So I need to queue over into the timing software in order to scroll the grid there. Matt Sissel is 13th ahead of Alfredo Tricarici, Chris J. Roberts, and Tony Fender Linden with Baron Glover, Stephen Orwell, Andy Spicer, and Robert Vandenheuvel, the Lobster, indeed rounding off the top 20. Then it's Stuart Jacklin in 21st. 21st? That's a funny new number. One's hasn't been invented yet even. Stuart Jacklin 21st, that is, ahead of Bradley Pascoe 22nd, and final driver on our grid tonight for 90 minutes of racing here at Monza.
So here we go, the cars lining up on the grid, you would imagine, any moment soon. There we go, just behind the safety car. See Patrick Gannon there in third position. RPM Racing driving his nice blacked out BMW. See plenty of them on the motorways nowadays. Blacked out BMs, blacked out windows, blacked out rims. Hopefully won't drive like a BMW driver. And will be nice and cautious in towards turn one. Don't want to pile up, as we often do see in GT racing here at Monza.
Nowadays, Edward, it seems to me, to be honest, that Audi drivers are by far and away the worst.
Well, we've only got two of them, thankfully.
Yes, but
let's
see how closely they insist on driving to the car in front. We'll see just what I mean about that, if that's true. Charlie Lund-Nielsen, and of course, as you mentioned, Chris Roberts. Further down.
Swedish driver still racing under the Norwegian flag, so he's not going to be happy about that.
It's not really the Norwegian flag. It's sort of a mix between Norwegian and Icelandic.
Norwegian.
Yes, it's sort of Scandinavia there.
It's Norwegian, I think we call that.
Yeah, that's as a Scandinavian man myself, I'm not impressed.
Not pleased at all as Hasse, but he's going to be very pleased with his starting position, 5th, and in behind some very quick drivers. Hopefully they will battle and allow him to gain a little bit of time, but safety car will soon peel off into the pits after they come through the final corner. Martin de Jong will lead the way from Nicholas Cocato and Patrick Gannon, but when does he go? Ideally as late as possible to prevent the run down into turn one. But of course the other drivers will be wise to that. You can see Nicholas Cocato getting alongside, getting ready. Looking to the right. When is he going to go? And I think they're going to go now, Hasse.
Yeah, they've gone pretty early here, but you can see Cocato had to slow down a little bit. Martin de Jong with a huge run. He's going to need that, and they're going to be squabbling in between themselves. That's Gannon and Maseroni for third place. Maseroni's on the outside. That's going to be a difficult ask. So if he can squeeze it in there, he's going to grab it away from Patrick Gannon. Let's see. A little bit of door banging going on, I think. So far, it seems everybody's made it through safely there, which is quite the sight here at Monza in any sim. Impressive so.
Well, the second chicane's coming up. How long will that last? Side by side in the back, all the way through. Nazaraki their way for, I believe that was about for 5th place, as Remco Barlow and Charlie Lund-Nielsen continue scrapping through the Lesmos here, Hasse. Very close, but Lund-Nielsen just about being able to hold on to 5th place. Doesn't want to fight too much, otherwise he will lose the slipstream from the rear end of Gaston Maseroni, who himself is in a scrap now with Patrick Gannon. Side by side go in towards Ascari, the outside line. If he can be brave enough on the brakes, might be able to get this move done, but it's so difficult. Can they go side by side? Just about, and sweeping his way around the outside. They still go side by side. Now the outside becomes the inside, then the outside, then they touch and spin across the field. And a roadblock has been formed. Why did he reverse?
It's the big one.
Dear, oh dear.
It is the big one, Edward. It's been such a clean lap, and it's still going on down there. Look, we thought it couldn't get worse. And it's just about managed to do so anyway, and that is a horrible sight indeed. The young lead from Cocato, then Remco Barlow and Pete Plastow, Craig Durant, Matthew Terry, then Cody Steek up in 7th place there in the Mercedes. Tony van der Linden leading now in ahead of Baron Glover, Stephen Orrell, and then Alfredo Tricarici. And a number of cars into the pits.
Yeah, one of the saddest things about that is Darren Fellows got caught up in that AM class leader. Huge shame for the driver that's looking to have back-to-back victories in his class at the start of the season, but Sadly, not to be. Martin de Jong, though, with the fastest lap of the race. I think fastest lap of the evening as well is 46.5, quicker than his qualifying. And now here we go. It was a big jump over the curb. Gaston Maceroni getting tagged. He does the sensible thing, but I think what we're going to see now is that 86 car, Patrick Gannon, suddenly start reversing. And I think that was the real... Charlie Nilsson, I don't think was holding the brakes, but then Patrick Gannon was actually reversing. I think for some reason trying to get out of the way, but actually ended up coming into the path of all of the cars, trying to stay for evasive action. Let's have a look here, Hasse.
Yeah, he tried to reverse out of the way, not really realizing, I think, that he was going to reverse right onto the exit of the Ascari chicanes. And that was... Oh, speaking of a jinx there, Edward, I'm afraid, because we praised the drivers for making it through on lap 1, but that was a third of the field being taken out on one incident there at the end of lap 1, in a place where we don't see it all that often, but of course, I think a lot of drivers have tried that particular thing with bouncing off of the sausage curbs there on the inside. Very easy to do, very easy to lose control, especially if you're too wide, as they were out in front, and that's gonna haunt them for a while, I'm afraid. That is not a good start for a bunch of drivers there now. Baron Glover and Stephen Orrell and the two Porsches are going at it. And what is now for...
behind.
Yeah, second place in Am here as well.
Good fight, scrapping on. I mean, Tony van der Linden isn't too far ahead either. You can see the Stage 1 Racing BMW just at the head of the shot. Going through Grande. Go back now, looking in towards the Rogia chicane. Hard onto the brakes, hitting that curb nicely. Missing the second one because that cannot settle the car in these Porsches. We avoid the curbs like anything in these things. They can really upset the balance, even though they have been improving that aspect. But one thing you can't change is the fact that it is still a Porsche. All the weight is in the back, and if the car gets unsettled, that's the thing that's likely to want to break away and head off into a wall at the earliest opportunity. Here is a play here from Stuart Jacklin, McLaren driver, making a move on Andy Spicer in towards turn 1, and Andy Spicer, I think, chooses not to fight that one too hard.
Seems I was muted. My apologies for a quick intervention there. But anyways, I was just about to say it's a 90-minute race here, and that just makes an incident like that all the worse. Of course, on the other hand, you have a bit more time to fight back on it, as there is a too wide moment there, and that was Stephen Orrell pushing through. Gaston Maceroni's gone past on Robert van den Heuvel a bit further back in the field as well, as Maceroni is trying to make his comeback after that early incident.
Oh my word, 3 wide, Hasse into turn 1, and all of a sudden sweeping his way through on both of them. That was Alfredo Triccarici with a tricky move that he was just about able to pull off, but then he's suddenly having to drop back. What happened there? Did he overshoot it slightly?
He went straight through the chicane, Triccarici there.
Oh dear.
Not a chance to stop the car. Let's have another look at here, Edward. Just what happened. Let's see if we can get it from the wider shot as Triccarici pulls to the inside in the BMW. Stephen Orrell sort of pulls out of it, actually, and that's a wise decision, as Glover almost overshoots it as well, and Orrell, with the patience there, comes out on top.
Yeah, and that seems to be paying off for him. Stephen Orrell now in second place and might be able to stretch his advantage to third, as we see Baron Glover under considerable pressure from Triccarici. Pete Plastow, we just see for a moment there, he's up in 5th place, gaining plenty of positions from the early lap incident, didn't he? Now up into 4th position. Cody Steeg, Apex Tech Racing driver. This is not a fight for class position, but is a fight for overall race position. Mercedes versus BMW. Mercedes still quick in a straight line. Might be able to get a good run as they come through the Parabolica.
And then more stuff kicking off here as Triccarici is wanting to get back at the drivers. He's lost some positions earlier in the race, Mainly, I think, on the first lap, actually. It's been a very good start of the race here for Tony van der Linden. Here comes the grunt of the BMW, though, on the main straight. Down
Porsche with a little bit of slipstream.
Oh, yeah.
Helped out by Stephen Orrell as Baron Glover. Is he going to have the bravery to go all the way around outside and hold the inside? Yes, he is, but the switchback maneuver, Tricarici is going to try and aim and get a good exit. But that's the one area that the BMW really struggles, is applying the power out of those slow-speed corners. And sadly, sees him stay in 11th place at the moment.
And this is also where the Porsche really has its strong points, with the traction over the rear end, coming out of those slow corners. Place where it can be really hard to drag race a 911. Also, something has happened with Patrick Gannon, I'm afraid, here. Let's see, we've had an issue, and pressing play on the replay. Seems that I think he's just gone wide on his own.
Seems to be fine.
Yeah, I think it's okay. That is true. And then
I have to say as well, Hasse, the one to watch out for is Mason Odoni. I saw him through that second chicane. He was absolutely chucking it through. As we have a replay this time of Cody Steeg. This was the move into the second Lesmo on Tony van der Linden. And as it's a battle for class position, I would imagine that van der Linden will quite graciously slip behind. Oh my word! Almost snapping right into the wall. Well held there by the Dutchman. That could have been a very scary incident. For now, he holds on. Actually, as they come back the position, although as they come through the parabolic of Cody Steeg, just about gets an overlap, just about finds the inside line as they make their way now towards the first chicane. Sliding in behind us, Cody will probably re-emerge either to the inside or to the outside. Which way is he going to look? Neither. Looks at the rear end instead as they come into the braking zone and stays in 8th place.
There's
watch out for though is Andy Spice that, yeah, like you said, Hasse, go ahead.
I was just about to say it's Gaston Maceroni trying to make his way through on the AM field here, and not only was he involved in that incident on lap 1, but he's also losing precious time, having to move his way through, and of course not able to take his pit stop early on. And then Bradley Pascoe has gone past on Robert van den Heuvel here after a bit of a back and forth battle. Van den Heuvel overshoots in a bit of a door bang there, but I think they both escape from that more or less unhurt.
Gets a little dent to remember him by, but nothing too dramatic. They already look to be a little bit of damage anyway on the front right corner of that Mercedes.
Both of them has gone off track here, Edward, and it took quite a while for them to get back, so I'm afraid something might have happened here. Pascoe goes wide, and Van den Heuvel just follows him. Gets focused on the driver ahead. That's such an easy thing to do. Hits Bradley Pascoe, I'm afraid, who does get turned, and that got quite a bit worse than it had to be in the situation, but that is how it goes when the eyes get too focused on the driver ahead here. Tony van der Linden, he's gonna... I was about to say he's gonna throw away the AM lead to Cody Steeg, but forgetting for a moment there that Cody Steeg, of course, is now a pro driver. He's gonna see if he can sneak on through there on Tony van der Linden, but van der Linden is giving him no space at all. Wanting that buffer in between, maybe not thinking about the fact that this is a pro-am battle and all they're doing is backing them up into the clutches of Stephen Orrell. Look at the Porsche gaining so quickly as well. Tricarici, before he believes it, he's back in it for the M-Class lead battle as well, and he'll be licking his lips knowing his pace from qualifying. Gonna be an interesting one to follow. By the way, out ahead, it's still Martin de Jong now sitting on a just about 2-second lead in front of Nicolas Cucazzo, and then Remco Barlow in the 42 car there, not too far behind. Pete Plastow doing nicely for himself in 4th place overall ahead of Craig Durand and Matthew Terry at the moment.
Yeah, looks to be going all Martin de Jong's way tonight, doesn't it? Nice, comfortable, almost 2-second lead to Nicolas Cucazzo. Tony van der Linden under so much pressure from Cody Steeg, I think it would be smarter for him to just let the Apex Tech Racing driver through and then probably work out maybe a little bit of slipstream, because then he can save fuel, and that's going to be key in these endurance races more than anything. This is the onboard from Pete Plasdow of him seeing all of the carnage, all of the chaos, and whoa, that got the heart rate going, didn't it? Kept it virtually pinned, but I have to say, I think some of the drivers there might have been able to have done a little bit better. I think when the incident happened, Lund Nielsen was probably better for him to hold on to the brakes. Same as well with, I believe it was, I'm trying to think now, Patrick Gannon involved, who probably should have held the brakes rather than choosing reverse. But
well,
early days of the season, I'm sure that the stewards or whoever is in charge of driving standards will make sure to get that message across to the drivers as well. So it's not likely to be a problem we'll see too much more of.
No, and 9 out of 10 times I think that is the case. That's the best way to do it if you have an incident. Hold the brakes. Not only because it slows the car down and keeps it in a stationary place where it's sort of easy to avoid, but also the fact that when it's moving, holding the brakes is just going to make the car behave just that little bit more predictably, at least in most situations. And somebody's been off there. That is the Porsche.
That's Baron Glover, I believe.
Is,
that's
I'm
Baron
afraid.
Glover in a big incident, and that's not an area where you tend to see drivers have a moment. We'll have a look here.
He
vanishes for a moment,
heavily,
and that looks like
wall.
a hardware failure. That looks like something's frozen with his hardware, maybe some sort of glitch, and goes straight on. No input being put into the wheel. It just goes straight through.
Very heavy impact as well there. Those you're happy to see in a sim, but not in real life. Or you're not happy to see him in a sim, but you're glad that it's in a sim when it happens. So I'm sorry for the sort of a situational.
Dig you out of the hole, Hasse. Gaston Macedoni closing in on Stuart Jacklin here at some rate of knots now, 2 tenths of a second. The margin. They're coming into the parabolica, and actually, look at it. Hasse, he's going for the move up the inside already. Gaston Macedoni looking to make up positions sooner
blinking.
rather than later.
I thought he was blinking there for a second.
He's okay.
He was, yeah, right, wasn't he? That's a scary moment if he was blinking as well for Stuart Jacklin. Stuart Jacklin there with the grunt of the McLaren. Look at it, so low slung to the ground. Looks a treat as well. Macedoni's going to defend it. Stuart Jacklin is not going to go overly offensive. Is he? Oh, he isn't, is he? No, he's not. He's going to go side by side, but I think more focused on defending from Andy Spicer. They have a fair lead down to Robert Vandenheuvel. Matt Sissler got caught up in that early crash.
Something happened to Van der Linden that we missed out, Hasse, because now Stephen Orrell finds himself in the lead of the AM class.
He's at a major.
Something must have happened to our class leader. This is into the second Lesbo. Does it over-rotate? Does it tap onto the exit? Gets onto the power a little bit too early. Rear end brakes traction. Thankfully, he hits the soft barriers, so that doesn't cause much damage at all. You can see it looks virtually the same as it did before. Only thing that has really been damaged is his pride and his position in the race, as he now finds himself in third.
Yeah, that could be bad enough in itself. He now finds himself behind Tricorici. That was a moment of the car going somewhere where he wasn't quite intending it to. Looks very wayward on the rear here. He might have overheated the tires just ever so slightly here.
De Jong continuing to stretch his advantage to the rest of the field, way out in front now by actually closing in on my timing screen test by about 3 seconds, 2.5 seconds now. So looking to be going right De Jong's way as you have Lund Nielsen back out on track, but this is the man leading. Haven't seen much of him since the start, have we? But we might as well shine the spotlight on him for a brief moment, as he's done everything right so far. Get himself out of trouble and broken the toe, which is so difficult to do here at Monza. So tricky here, very straight line heavy circuit, very draft heavy as well. These races, if you're able to break the slipstream and try and get away while cars battling behind, you are laughing all the way. to the victory, almost certainly. It is barring, of course, any interesting strategies. Maybe going for a short final stop to put yourself in the right position coming into the race might be the way to go about things. So Kakata and Barlow will likely extend the race as much as they can, save as much fuel as well. That's pretty much their only way back into the fight, as we see Maceloni in a fight of his own against Tony van der Linden, iRacing driver who was taken out of the equation for the race victory early on in the stages of this race into the first lap through this very section into Ascari. Decides better off going side by side this time around. I think he's got bad memories all of a sudden here, Hasse, so I can only imagine why.
No wonder, huh? But looking at that onboard from Pete Plastow, that was pretty impressive as well. But it just goes to serve as a reminder that sometimes the only way you're going to make it through a situation like that is by keeping it absolutely pinned here. Tony van der Linden, a little bit of a poor exit for Tony, and I think Gaston Maceroni's on the tail. Unless he's suffering a little bit with a bit of damage maybe after that incident. He's able to pull along here, only just. Does break that little bit later it seems, and I think he'll make it out in front.
Seeing now some of the lap times coming through again. Martin de Jong is extending his advantage a tenth of a lap each and every time. Such a consistent pace up at the head of this field. Look at the flamethrower ahead from the McLaren and his Bicer. Confidence in his grip in the car just to send it into the corner. Really catch up to Stuart Jacklin, but it seems the acceleration just isn't quite there in the car. Both of them also struggling, I think, now with the tyre degradation as the circuit begins to warm. You can see the light getting a little bit brighter, a little bit less orange in the sky, beaming down on the asphalt, meaning that, of course, it's going to start to get hotter and hotter, and hotter track wears the tyres more, slows down the lap times, and could have some interesting ramifications for the latter stages here.
Yeah, and it's also, I think, untrodden ground for a lot of the field here in terms of strategy and how they're going to play out this 90-minute race. Normally we'd be halfway through it. We're just a quarter of the way through instead here now. But just how it's going to play out for the remainder of this race, well, we'll have to see. We still might see someone with an ace up their sleeve that we haven't seen coming. Someone's coming in the pits now, and that's Van der Linden here after 20 minutes.
Interesting what Van der Linden is going for here. Early pit stop, of course. He was put out of position following his mistake through the second Lesmo, so decides maybe it's time to do something different to try and get his race back in order. See him now in the pits. How long is his pit stop going to be? He's actually taking tyres. Very early to take tyres. Can't imagine it would have been that bad for performance, so maybe that is a mistake. Maybe he forgot to check them, or maybe he's deciding you're going to take tyres at one point in the race. Why not do the change early on?
Yeah, it's hard to call just about which of those. It could have been a mistake, honestly, but it could also be a strategy to take the tires now and then be able to take those tires to the end. It's hard to call. There might have been a lot of thought going to it, so we'll have to see how it plays out over the final hour and 10 minutes of this race.
Yeah, Van der Linden still in his box. You'd imagine he'd be moving soon. Have a look at some of the other time spent stationary for other cars. Not seeing much more of an idea about how long a car spends taking its tyres, and in fact it's just about out now. Tony van der Linden with a very long stop indeed, so yeah, I think that might have been just more than tyres going on there. There might have been maybe some damage being fixed, maybe deciding for some reason not to use a fast repair, because the drivers do have one fast repair for the race tonight. It's incredibly long pit stop there, 1 minute 30 spent stationary in the pits.
Minute and 30, so that's a properly long pit stop there, and well, that seems to have been a full stop more or less, Edward.
Yeah, full tank of fuel up to the, I believe, 103 litre threshold that these cars can hold, depending on the car. It's obviously different tank size, but I think the BMW takes about 103, 104 litres. So that is, yeah, seeming to be a full service. Interesting indeed for Van der Linden as he gets back out onto the circuit. Watching as well, likes of Stephen Orrell just continue to get through the laps, trying to build a gap if he can to Andy Spicer, currently in second place. Martin de Jong though out in the lead of the race, plain sailing, 2.5 seconds the advantage to Nicholas Cucato. Renko Barlow 4 seconds back from our race lead. You can just see him there at the rear of the shot. He's making his way down in towards the first chicane. Is our race leader. Just how strong has he been so far, Hasse? He's been brilliant.
Yeah, he's been flawless so far, and it's his to lose, it seems. The gap has stagnated more or less, but I think Martin de Jong also might just realize that he doesn't need to push any harder. He's got Nicolas Cucato out of the slipstream, and he can just sort of hold back, save the fuel, save the tires, and make sure that he doesn't get run over in any way on strategy. But an interesting thought that just hit me was that in terms of coming into this race on strategy, Edward, how would you approach it in terms of fueling and all that? Would you go for say 2 45-minute stints and then just trying to stretch the tires, or try to go for one long stint, then take the tires and then hammer home a short one at the end?
I don't know. It's very interesting, isn't it? It has the different things that some drivers will try and implement. But for me, I think you just go as long as you can for as much time as possible, and then see where that leaves you. If it leaves you with a short stop at the end of the race, so be it. So I think taking your shorter stop later is probably the call. He's got plenty of clear air up in front, Martin de Jong, as well, and that's probably the thing that we're going to see him opt for. As Chris Roberts, plenty of damage there on the rear end. I've not seen a rear wing ever bent like that.
No, that's a hefty one. I love the Ed May's pro advice there is to go as long as you can for as long as you can. Brilliant indeed. Chris Roberts with having discovered some new properties of carbon fiber that I didn't know existed. They did speak of coming in with this new damage model in iRacing, and it's been in existence for quite some time. It just hasn't been implemented on all the older machines yet, which is why we still see these funny-shaped bent carbon wings that, let's say we wouldn't say in real life. But that's what it is. Craig Durant's coming in for a pit stop, as well as Gaston Maceroni. You wonder, Edward, if it even is that. Because I was thinking, I've been trying to locate in the rules, and somebody might be able to answer me this as well. But I've been unable to locate whether they are running with that usual 50% fuel cap, or whether they're able to run full tanks here. I just don't know.
They can see that there is a fuel limit of 50%, so that might be what we're saying. That should still get you to around about the half-hour mark of the race. So that might be what we're seeing now, Hasse, as drivers making their stops just before the half hour. Still interesting to see that Van der Linden was coming in that early on a 50% fuel tank.
Yeah, but it's Monza, and it's a lot of full throttle here, which might be why we're seeing drivers struggle to make that half-hour mark. Let's see the top runners here. I'll be really interested, because I think it would make a lot of sense for drivers to make sure they make it to the halfway mark, but they can't, or the halfway mark, the half-hour mark, they can't, which is going to mean it's going to be a two-stopper essentially, but they're all gonna have to make a splash and dash at the end of it, unless they save fuel. But it's gonna be for a lap and a half here over a stint. That's certainly not easy. So just how they are going to come out from this round of pit stops, that's going to be an interesting one here. Pete Plastow's just going to roll in there as well. Matthew Terry, Cody Steek comes in as well for their pit stops, and Stephen Orrell, well, he's not going to be the odd one out in this situation, not at all. Kukato's out ahead of De Jong. Look at this. Quick pit stop from Nicolas Kukato. And he's done the Dutchman in the pit lane.
It's the second time this season we've seen him do someone in the pit lane in the second round. So Kukato seems to have it absolutely nailed down. Maybe this is his attempt to try and be the spoiler in the pack, going for a short early pit stop. He might realize that everyone's going to do a splash and dash anyway. Why not just make his pit stops that little bit shorter throughout the race and sort of spread out the time that way? Could be an interesting move. We'll see how it works out. Martin de Jong, though, just heard the engine note make a very peculiar noise. That was the sound of it dipping into the clutch. So Martin de Jong, I think for fuel-saving tactics, we're probably going to hear it a lot coming down into Ascari if we go on board with the Dutch driver. Should be able to let us know. Shifting down and now in towards Ascari. Are we going to see that familiar sort of dip in the engine note as he lifts and coasts? There we go. Opting to try and extend his stint now for as far into the race as he can. Target firmly in the sights of the magical 1 hour mark, because then he will be able to do a final 30-minute stint until the end of the race. But it's good to get those sort of onboard shots and listen to the engine and know just exactly what the trucks are doing.
Yeah, and there's no way you can get out of anything here. Oh, Matthew Terry is at the pit exit, and he's gonna jump back to the pits for some reason. I don't know what happened to him here. He might have... that's actually a very good question. Oh, that's because it's not even on play as we're coming here. Oh, so here's what happens. He pulls over. That's rather weird. I don't think he's gotten back in the car yet, but it's gonna be a lengthy tow as well, so that's rather unfortunate. Close fight here. That's Charlie Lund Nilsson, who's on the tail of Alfredo Tricarici, our M-Class leader here. Matt Sisseler able to stretch it to the half an hour mark, so that's an interesting one for Sisseler, who's been the quickest on pace. This strategy could get him a while. You think he was of course involved in that early incident as well, so that explains it. So maybe down to poor luck early in the race more than anything else. Cody Steek now has Gaston Maceroni on his tail. Look at this, in the battle for 6th place overall. But we've seen before in this race here tonight, Edward, that the Mercedes is not necessarily the fastest car around a lap, but it can be very hard to get a run considering the top speed that the Mercedes has.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's the thunder in V8, isn't it? It's so difficult to get past it, but Gaston Maceroni very quick through the corners in his BMW. Might be his best chance to go for a run coming out of Ascari. See it here, it just looks so planted, doesn't it? The BMW, both of the cars, to be fair, looking a little bit. There's slight sketchiness in the Mercedes now through the corners. Doesn't seem to be as strong as it once was, but now Maceroni with a good little run. Might have a slight look up the inside to throw Cody Steeg off his line. Not quite. Of course, Gaston Maceroni involved in the lap 1 hullabaloo. Trying to bring his stint out. Basically, he's done his splash and dash very early in the race now. This Gaston Maceroni did it basically at the end of lap 1 when he had to serve the... not serve, but rather fix his damage as he goes down the inside now. And is Cody Steeg going to fight this? Probably not too hard. Still looks for a little bit of an overlap, a little bit of a switchback, but nothing going on there, is there? And instead, what we see is Mason trying to stretch his legs and build a margin now to stop the might of that Mercedes engine from bringing it back into the fight.
Yeah, and we're gonna see just how much advantage he can make of it. Certainly close enough, but can he stay there? That's the issue. It does seem to lose a little bit over the curbs compared to Gaston Maceroni's BMW. It's an interesting one to note. Meanwhile, in the lead battle, Martin Young's seemingly pretty happy just to follow Nicolas Cucazzo around here for the moment.
Looks to be that way for the moment. He isn't really losing out any time to Remco Barlow, which is his nearest threat for P in P3, but for his P2 and potential P1 race victory. Huge amount of lifting and coasting as well, and I think we know exactly why he's quite content to stay behind Nicolas Cucazzo, because he knows saving fuel will help him massively towards extending his stint this time by 1 lap, and that should see him comfortably to that 1 hour magical mark.
Yeah, and if he can do that and even maybe stretch it a bit beyond, especially knowing that Cucazzo took that stop and took a very short one, and he did fuel a little bit less in order to gain those 2 seconds on that pit stop. So even though Cucazzo is in front now, being that he's not really able to break away from Martin de Jong, I think the Dutchman still has it under control, but we'll have to see how it plays out. And that round of pit stops around the 1 hour mark is going to be very interesting for seeing just where the different drivers are. Of course, Cucazzo could be on for some heavy fuel saving on his final stint, but I think it's going to be a hard one to be able to stay competitive while having to fuel save that heavily for one stint.
I think anything you can do at this mid-phase of the race will have huge ramifications, though, for the latter stage phases. You don't know exactly how much it'll help, but then when you look back at the race afterwards, that was probably the point where on the race, and I think if Martin de Jong does go on to eventually win this, he'll probably look back and think, the time I spent saving fuel behind Nicolas Cucazzo in that early phase of the race, while I wasn't leading, that put me in good stead to come out into the lead at the end with maybe a shorter pit stop, or probably not needing to make a splash and dash, because Cucazzo as well, you've got to realise, he was stationary in the pits taking on fuel for 18 seconds. Martin de Jong was there for 21 seconds. So that's 3 seconds worth of difference. Quite a lot of fuel not going into Cucazzo's car, potentially. So that could see ramifications later on. Chris Roberts, Matt Sisseler scrapping away. Matt Sisseler leading them through Ascari. And then Chris, maybe with a slightly creative rear wing design, might be able to get a little bit more top speed with that. And I could fancy a move coming through the Parabolica.
Yeah, but the question is how stricken that Audi is going to be in top speed in terms of the whatever drag penalty is going to have with that rear wing damage. Whatever it might be as well, the diffuser we'll see now, because Chris J. Roberts very close, but he does pull out. He pulls back in again, I think not really able to get that all-important overlap on the BMW. Behind him it's Robert van den Heuvel. Still half a second between Cucazzo and Martin de Jong out ahead, so status quo in that situation, and
Fredo Tricarici leading now the AM class, that made his pit stops earlier on in the race, coming in on lap 12. compared to race leader Martin de Jong, who came in on lap 15. So another sign that maybe a different strategy being employed by the Argentine driver. But it's one that seems to be working for now, as he's ahead of his nearest rival, Stephen Orrell, by about 6, almost 7 seconds. And I think every lap is extending that advantage further. We'll just see lap time as Tricarici comes across 150.114. So 150.1. Stephen Orrell comes across the line 150.3. So another 2 tenths extended on that past lap by iRacing driver. Looks to be going quite nicely for Alfredo, but of course, what will that early pit stop cost him later on in the race?
Oh, there's a good run for Chris Roberts, who's going to take that position now from Matt Sisseler. I think he just got a very poor run through the Parabolica, and yet look at the straight line speed of the BMW. They're going to go side by side.
About affording each other enough space, aren't they, on the exit? And Chris Roberts able to get ahead of Matt Sisseler. But, well, this battle keeps fighting and raging on, doesn't it? And all of the while, Rob, in the background, Rob the Lobster, we know him as, quite happily, just waiting in the wings for all this to unfold.
Yeah, he's gonna be happy as long as they don't slow him down too much. Oh, someone's just touched the gravel there up ahead. I wonder who that was. That must have been Stuart Jacklin in the McLaren. A few touches of the gravel here and there as Patrick Gannon is on the tail of Tricarici here. Patrick Gannon, who was up and about in a good position earlier in the race, but he also seen his fair share of bad luck, having to battle the M-Class leader. But for on-track position,
as I was watching it unfold, and I thought they were going to do exactly what they did last time, but Alfredo Tricarici just goes straight on. Had to have a massive slowdown, and that's going to bring all of a sudden Stephen Orrell much closer into the picture. The gap was nearly 7 seconds. Now it'll come down to probably 4, maybe even 3.5. Game on, potentially, in the AM class.
Yeah, and that's all it takes is a say a relatively small mistake like that. You can see how much Stephen Orrell is fuel saving as well. So Stephen Orrell's got the tactics nailed on for this one, and with a consistent drive in the Porsche here, he could be in for a very good result by the look of it here. We're just about halfway through the race, just a few minutes away from it, and oh, there's been an incident here, or is that just a... It's Van den Heuvel letting Charlie Lund-Nielsen through. Oh, and there's been an issue for the race leader, or who was indeed the race leader. Look at this!
Whoa, whoa, whoa. What were we just saying about Martin de Jong? It looked like he had the race all wrapped up, but then one little moment, and all of a sudden that hardback's been undone. That's a hit into quite a hard wall. Bit of damage done to the front end as well. That's going to really hurt him on these straights. Front end aero damage, potentially even engine damage. That could really hurt him. We'll just see it here. Rear end, I think he just goes too wide.
Yeah, he loses it on the slippery path there on the AstroTurf, right?
Up, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think
it's more about the way the circuit sort of, it's banked, and then all of a sudden there's that flat plane, isn't there, on the sort of the green painted area, and I think it's when one half of the car is on the banked section, the other half is on that flat plane, that unsettles the car massively, and that's what saw him getting spat right into the very hard, unforgiving Armco barrier. And well, Kakato, last season's champion, being afforded a little bit of fortune.
Yeah, definitely so, and it's a hard one to swallow, I think, for Martin de Jong, who was looking like he was in such a good position. Pete Plastow not
we see
now
what his straight line speed is like, potentially Hasse.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one.
We can pull that up. So Martin de Jong, we'll have a look into the net chicane. He's getting maybe a minor tow from Pete Plastar, so we might try and factor that in. 1.6 seconds ahead. Actually, Pete Plastar is pulling away regardless.
It's hardly going into 6th gear. Just about. That doesn't sound like it's...
160.
Yeah.
160 miles per hour. And then we go back to, say, Gaston Maceroni, who's 16 seconds back in BMW as well. Let's have a look at this. It seems to be a much healthier sounding note as well, actually. You can just hear it.
Yeah.
Easily up into 6th gear. Going to be 161. Jumping back a lot, but that was about 164. Wasn't it? Hasse 165 as he came into the braking zone. So 4 miles per hour. That is quite a lot. So that is going to really hurt Martin de Jong's chances in this race. If he has a fast repair, which I believe he does, he needs to take that right away.
Yeah, but the problem is he can't compromise his strategy too much with it as well. So he might just have to live with it here for the rest of the stint, then take it on his next planned pit stop.
Yeah, but then also that extra front end damage means that he's going to be using more fuel because he's going to be spending more time on the straights because of his slower speed, more time on full throttle, and that, of course, the way iRacing calculates fuel, if you're not familiar, done on throttle position, not revs, not anything like drag or anything. It's purely down to throttle position, and that is why Martin de Jong is really going to struggle now to see this race progress for him into his next phase of pit stops at the 1 hour mark.
Then it all came to unravel there in a moment's
I'm thinking we might see Martin in at about the 55-minute mark, maybe in about 10 minutes' time. Might have saved enough earlier on in the race behind Nicholas Cacato to neutralise that somewhat. But I would be very surprised if we see that car make it another 15 minutes, make it to that crucial 1 hour mark. Cacato and Remco Barlow, though, making it a Kawanda race in 1-2. Who knows, maybe we'll see them sitting pretty on the podium with Pete Plastar. Himself was actually involved in that early lap incident, didn't we? When he parted the waters, picked up a little bit of damage on that right front hand, that sort of right front side, but looked to be okay for now. I think he managed to get it done with his fast repair.
Yeah, I don't even think he took the fast repair on that first pit stop. I think he thought, you know what, I'm gonna save that for later. I'm not sure. It could have been something he picked up after that. I'm not quite sure of that, but that's speculation at best. But you can see just how hard-pressed Martin de Jong is to avoid losing time there to Pete Plastar out ahead. Constantly bleeding. And it's just as soon as the road is straight, there's really nothing he can do. Tony van der Linden has had a problem here. That's quite interesting. He's been in a good place earlier this race. Oh, massively over. Oh, he gets overtaken, then overshoots it, and he's come into the pits this round, which of course does sort of make sense. He had an early pit stop as well, and a long one. You wonder, does he take tires here as well?
I wouldn't imagine so. I think he's seen
surprised.
everyone else having much shorter pit stops, and I think he's going to realise, yep, Tony van der Linden already on his way out of the pit lane. So very quick stoppers. Look at this, side by side. Cody Steeg scrapping away, isn't he, just with Patrick Gannon. Excellent battle this for 7th place. RPM Racing ahead of Apex Tech Racing. But Cody Steeg, the mighty Mark, marches on up the inside. It'll be difficult to stop all of that weight, and in fact actually decides to stay behind for a little bit, in behind Patrick Gannon as they make their way into the braking zone all the way now through turn 1 and onto the exit. Though Mercedes very good at applying the power, and you see him try and reel him in through Curva Grande in towards the second chicane, too far back to make a move. And maybe Cody Steeg is deciding now's the time to save a little bit of fuel, getting close to the pit stops. Let's see what I can do, save a bit of fuel. He's already actually made Has he made 2 stops? No, Patrick Gannon is the driver that's made 2 stops so far this race, apparently, according to my timing software.
A few drivers has made 2 stops. Sissler as well.
Of course he has, yeah. Gannon was the car that was involved in the
Steek though, but Cody Steek, of course, has only made 1 pit stop, so he's still on his original strategy. Makes it all the more impressive for Patrick Gannon to have this fight in the first place.
That engine though has a beautiful sound, isn't it? Because we're on board with Cody Steeg now and towards Ascari.
See though, it's heavy at the
it just
front
opens
end.
the taps, doesn't it, out of the corner? Beautiful.
Certainly does, but you can also see on the way the car's balanced that it is a little bit heavy over the front and not as happy to change direction as some of the other cars are. Oh, a bit of a moment there for Patrick Gannon. And that's going to be the chance for Cody Steeg to claw back some time, get himself back into the slipstream. 48 minutes into this race.
Trying to come back from the lap 1 disappointment. He has, of course, already taken his fast repair. Alfredo Tricaric now early into the pits. Driver that came in very early on in the race earlier on, not the race before this race, but earlier on, coming in on lap 12, now coming in on lap 27. So seems to be able to make these 15 lap stints start to work again compared to the rest of the field, but of course has put him out of sync that earlier shorter stop. Seems taking tyres, not likely to get your brain working. See him taking fuel, not likely to be taking tyres. No, he isn't. 22 seconds stationary, already out of his pit box now, making his way down pit lane. So that promotes this man, Hasse, into the lead of the M-Class.
Yeah, and given the differences on strategy, we might be looking at a pit stop less at the end of the race for Stephen Aura, who's been very close.
Kakato in race leader. Sorry, Hasse just got across. He was coming to the pits very early indeed. Overshoots his pit box just slightly. Now Remco Barlow realizes that Kakato wasn't able to save any fuel on that last stop. And that might mean if he can make it to that hour mark, he's in a very good spot. Very good indeed. And actually, Kakato, is he going to get going now? Yes, he does. 22 seconds stationary. That seems to be about half a tank of fuel in these cars to fill it up right to the brim. 22 seconds. No tyres being taken whatsoever. All the drivers are deciding that is not the way to plan here at Monza, but that is very sensible. This is a circuit that uses the fuel a lot more than the tyres, being as there are as many corners as there are straights.
Yeah, that's true. And it's certain 3-stopper there from Kakato. It's an interesting one to see. Just a blatant 3-stopper that the other drivers are trying to see if they can haul home a 2-stop strategy. And I think that it, at least by the looks of it, it could indeed be possible. And if it is, for a driver like Pete Plastow, Remco Barlow as well, of course, he could be looking at some top positions from that. Martin de Jong, even if he can make it last, he'll be back in the fight against Nicolas Kakato, I think, even with his spin. And being 12.5 seconds back, that's going to be a tough ask to claw back Remco Barlow. But we'll see what he can do once he gets the machinery fixed. As we are expecting him to still have his fast repair for this race available to him.
Going to be interesting to see what Martin Young will do to try and get himself back into this race. Of course, like you mentioned, being able to extend this stint and maybe make it to the 1 hour mark is probably his best shot, realistically. As Craig Durant now makes his pit stop. Highest placed of the Porsches so far in this race. Second highest Porsche being, of course, the Darius Scary Porsche. The vegan Porsche this time, not opting for the vegan Mercedes, as I'm so used to saying, and whenever we come to Stephen Orwell. Tell you what, I still do miss the old Mercedes, even though the new one is just as nice, just as fun to drive. Part of me still misses it.
I've never driven either or, I have to say, so I don't really have a relationship to it. But the new one looks better, I think, by a fair bit, to be honest. Not that I didn't like the old one. Here, Sissler gets the run on the McLaren, and he's gonna see if he can just push on through. I was just about to knock over my keyboard there. That would have been an interesting one.
McLaren slightly faster in a straight line, as we see Matt Sissler going all the way over to the inside line and looking to try and get the move done. Has to afford space, has to allow the room on the inside. Coming out of the corner, there's a bit of a snap on the exit. I think the lack of rear downforce almost caught Chris Roberts unawares. Now he's trying to fancy a move as they make their way through Curva Grande. Stuart Jacklin going to look up the inside into the De La Rosière chicane. He might fancy it. No, gets a little bit of a tap as they go into the braking zone. Wheels touching for the briefest of moments, unsettling the McLaren that just about hangs on to the grip and makes its way through the chicane without incident. This is a great three-way fight, though. A fight with an AM driver right smack dab in the middle of it that might be wanting to get out of the way and out of harm's way as soon as possible, as Gaston Messeroni are now coming into the pits on lap 30.
So both he and Patrick Gannon into the pits here, but this would be the time where the drivers who didn't make it to the half-hour mark on that first stint, where they'd be coming into their pit stops around now. Well, interestingly, we'll see when Martin de Jong comes in. And then the big questions here, I think, is Pete Plastow and Remco Barlow there. Pete Plastow's had a lot of fuel in the car, or at least one of the drivers who's had the longest pit lane time, which would usually equate to the most fuel in the car as well. We just have to see how that goes for him.
Those are the biggest questions, aren't they, Hasse? Really, those two drivers are the biggest question marks in Martin de Jong's race as it stands, because he knows that the others guaranteed to make just, well, one more pit stop, won't they, after this time by. So Martin de Jong needs to make sure he only needs one, as Remco Barlow answers one of those questions with his car entering the pits. However, Pete Plastow, are we going to see him come in as well? Yes, we do. What has Martin de Jong been able to do? Has been able to save enough to carry on one further lap? Yes, he has. So he's at least saved a lap compared to those drivers around him. But he realistically needs to go a little bit longer, maybe one lap, maybe an extra lap as well, just to give him that margin, because we're currently 55 minutes into a 1 hour 30 race. He needs to make it to 2/3 distance to be comfortable enough finishing this race without needing to stop 2 times.
Yeah, but remember the pit stop counts in as well, and he'll probably have an easier time with a fixed car and saving that fuel on the last stint as well. Of course, he won't have the advantage of a driver giving him a very nice tow for lap after lap like he had earlier with Nicolas Cucazzo, who's 20 seconds behind still. So we're just going to have to see.
Well, Hasse, just a note. Oh, as Martin de Jong just makes a mistake. I was going to say he's got so much time to play with if he is able to save fuel to make it last. But this was into the first of the 2 Lesmos. Just, I think, taps a little bit on the way in, and then that unsettles the car. It just takes too much speed in. Completely goes on him. Has to hang on to the brakes to stop himself going straight on him. Maybe a lapse of concentration there. And that's the second time we've seen him make a mistake. Very uncharacteristic for Martin de Jong, who I've raced with, like I said before. He's a great racing driver. Rarely makes an error, but sadly tonight he has really, really been struggling. Quick for pace, but consistency is just lacking. Maybe it's to do with the setup. Maybe it's just to do with the new build. He's not quite familiar with the car and its characteristics just yet. Needs to get a few more races under his belt. But this is not looking good for Martin de Jong, and that little moment could just seal it. Knows, though, that, of course, he's got 14 seconds advantage if he is able to carry on, but no, comes into the pit. So I think we are seeing Martin de Jong not able to make it until the end of the race. Will need to make one extra pit stop after this current one is in the pits for. Battle though, Stephen Orrell, Gaston Messeroni. Don't think Stephen is going to fight it. Stephen is actually a good shout for a brilliant result here, as he is yet to make his second pit stop still. The only driver that's currently pitted once so far this race. Everyone pitted twice. Martin de Jong pitted twice. Stephen Orrell still out there.
Yeah, he's held on brilliantly. He's got a big old lead over Alfredo Tricarici, 34 seconds at the moment. So you gotta wonder if that's enough to even come out ahead of Tricarici, but you'd expect him to be able to go the distance with this pit stop. He pits now here at the lap, or at the 58th minute of the race.
If he was able to save one further lap, he likely would have made it to that 1 hour mark.
But the pit stop counts as well in time, Edward. So
it won't give him any more than about 20 seconds or so. So he'll probably get moving at about the 58, sort of 30 mark.
Yeah, the time in the pit lane as well, though.
Is it the 58:30 mark? Am I right on the money? Let's have a look. 58:30 now. He's going to get moving. Here we go, Hasse.
And then
prophetic.
Yeah, but then it's a few seconds as well as he's onto the racetrack here where he goes slowly, and that's...
I just don't think he's going to be able to make this last till the end of the race, though, Hasse, sadly. I think if he's able to make one further lap, it might have been alright, but certainly not this time by. Although, pitting in on lap 31, he came into the pits on lap 15, so that's now 16 lap stint. If he makes another 16 lap stint, that might just be enough, you know. He might just be able to save enough fuel. Tricarici, you know, he's guaranteed to make one more pit stop, and probably a slightly longer pit stop than Stephen Orrell will have to make if Stephen Orrell does need to pit. So that could be the real difference maker, is will Stephen Orrell need to pit, and how long will he spend? Probably no more than a couple of seconds, you would imagine.
Yeah, that's the question. That is the question indeed here. Chris J. Roberts, he's really feeling the pressure from James Foster in the Ferrari, who I think has quite a lot of extra straight line speed. The question is, of course, not all about straight line pace. Although if you can set it up properly here, the Audi seems to be very well balanced though still for Chris Roberts, so certainly doing a good job hanging on to it. And those drivers that had, I would say, a race-ending pit stop that early on in terms of getting thrown off the strategy and just a big old chunk of time to lose.
As we have now come to the 1 hour mark, I unfortunately have to leave you. I am not the only person in my household, unfortunately, and I have noise limits I must adhere to. So sadly for me, with these longer races starting a little bit later as well, this race was planned to start an hour early to allow for time, but had to push back due to drivers not being available. So I will have to take my leave, Hasse, but it has been great commentating alongside you tonight. It's been a great race so far, and hopefully you enjoy the final the final half hours. Look at this, a great scrap in towards turn 1. Just watch them get through with a little bit of a bump through, and with that little bump, I will head off to bed now, Hasta. Thank you very much.
As Edward May is known to go out with a bang. They almost did there, James Foster and Chris Roberts. Indeed, thanks for joining me tonight, Edward. It's been a pleasure as always, and I'll see you again in 2 weeks' time for the next one as they scrap on into the second variante. The chicanes, of course, has been at Monza for many years now, but of course there was a time, as with any motor racing track basically, before the addition of chicanes. I say that, but of course a lot of tracks that were built modern would have had some kind of corner structure built in to make sure that speed doesn't get excessively high. Of course, and excessively high speeds we've certainly had in the past at Monza. As it's sort of been tamed, this battle. Far from tame indeed, as we saw before. Plenty of passion brewing between the two. I think we haven't seen the last of it. Now, less than half an hour remaining in this race. Baden de Jong appears to be a bit shaken here. We've had a problem for Bradley Pascoe as well, and he's gonna have a look here as he... I should have just gone out and taken the racing line into the corner and he wouldn't have had such a problem, I'm afraid. Patrick Gannon, though, has had a major issue here as well. And that's behind Aaron Fellows. Gannon just goes off on his own. And then maybe, is that just it? Yeah, that's just 2 harmless off tracks. Gonna be a bit of incident points. That's always annoying, but nothing race ended. Jay Roberts is able to hold on here impressively from James Foster. Clearly quicker, it seems, in the Audi, but the damage maybe holding Chris Roberts back a little bit here. These are by quite a margin the closest 2 cars on track at the moment, although the driver you see in front of these 2 now is very much a battle on track as well, as it's Matt Sisseler. So this scrap could very well turn into a 3-way fight here, and of course we'll be keeping our eyes peeled to the pit stops once we get so far as well. That's going to be an interesting point in the race. Equally interesting is anyone going to be able to stretch their final stints to make it all the way to the line? I'm not quite sure, but if it is, well, if there isn't even... Oh, here comes James Foster with the squeeze there. I think he manages to stop it in time this time around. Slight touch on the gravel there from Chris Roberts, but he's on the tail of the Ferrari here. James Foster, I also think, realizing that, hey, look at this, we got Matt Sisseler right up ahead, and another position, maybe pushing for the top 10 here in Pro. Of course, we've got a few AM drivers up ahead, both Tricarici and Stephen Orrell, mixing it up with the Pro class top 10 drivers. Very good performances by the AM leaders again today. As it was a week ago at Interlagos, especially from Darren Fellows. Oh, look at that! That's Matt Sisseler, and he's gone and lost it at the exit of Ascari, all on his own. Chris Roberts has had an issue too, and I wonder, has this... How? Oh, he's just lost it on his own. What kind of curse was bestowed there from James Foster? The Foster's curse, I'm not quite sure. Matt Sisseler, who actually lost it after he just touched that inside curb a little bit too hard, went into the soft barrier, but did so heavily as well. And from having quite a lot of competition around him, he finds himself now fairly isolated here, James Foster, with quite a bit less to think about in the end. What was that? Flashing their lights down the back straight, I'm not quite sure. Here's Andy Spicer. You can see the intervals between the drivers. fairly spread out throughout the field. And as such, we're going to be looking to the strategy here of the final 20-some minutes of this second round of Sunday GT Masters here from Monza. Cody Steeks in the pits. Patrick Gannon has already had that third pit stop, but that's not going to be enough to make it to the line. So that's going to require 4 for Gannon, I think. Cody Steek's going to drop back a little bit now, but there's a decent chance that it's going to be just a pretty much a splash and dash. Now, of course, there's also a point that the further you can keep it running now, less fuel you're going to need to finish the race, and as such we're going to need to spend less time in the pits. But is it going to be enough for a driver like Martin de Jong? It's 22.2 seconds down on the race leader. Incidentally, it's about 7 seconds from Kukato to this man currently in second place, Remco Barlau. And just 3-some seconds down to Pete Plastow here. So Plastow, certainly not out of it. With a little bit of blinking there, that'll scare anyone involved. Here's Charlie Lund Nilsson. He's on the tail of Alfredo Tricarici. Tricarici is still the AM class leader. Even on lap 26. So be expecting Tricarici to come in relatively soon here, and then for a relatively long final stop. We'll see how that plays out against Stephen Orrell, who's 13.6 seconds down on him. It's certainly not going to be 13 seconds to gain for Orrell, at least so I would think. But if Stephen Orrell can save that fuel on this final stint, it'll be an impressive one if he can be the only driver to successfully two-stop the race. And we'll be keeping an eye on that as we are now coming into the final 20 minutes of racing here from Monza. Patrick Gannon set a purple sector 2 on this lap, so very decent pace for Gannon it seems, but there's a few other drivers here tonight just lacking that outright final consistency to really string it all together, it seems. Charlie Lund Nilsson in the Audi ahead of Alfredo Tricarici on track here, but I don't think they're gonna battle it out too hard at least. Bradley Pascoe still out running. We've seen Stuart Jacklin, Matthew Terry, and Baron Glover, who's all pulled out of this race, all retired. And I would say, I think for all of them, it's been down to that humongous lap 1 pile-up coming down towards the Parabolica. All kicked up, exiting the Ascari chicane while the field still compressed, moving at a high speed and leaving not a lot of reaction time for a lot of the drivers, especially the drivers further down as well, where a number was caught up. Here we have Nicolas Kukato though coming into the pits with about 18 minutes of racing remaining. So we'll see Barlow goes for another lap there. And obviously I think Pete Plastow is going to do the same. And Kukato, who goes a little bit too far into his pit booth again, did the very same thing on his last pit stop. The third time in, third time's the charm. It'll be a fairly long pit time though of 20 seconds here from Nicolas Kukato. For him just to be able to make it to the line there. That's certainly interesting. So I think the first of the leaders at least to take that third pit stop. 18 minutes to go. Nicolas Kukato now out. He's going to be racing for the checkered flag. Matt Sissler, Tony van der Linden in as well. Here, James Foster and Stephen Orrell. I'll still be looking to see if Orrell can actually challenge Alfredo Tricarici, the AM leader at the moment. This strategy he's trying to execute. Pete Plastow's coming in for his final pit stop. I think we'll see Martin de Jong going on for quite a bit of time here. The question is just how much time, because well, we saw him clutch out and coast earlier, but whether that's just gonna be enough on its own, it's such a hard one to say. Kukato at least out ahead of Pete Plastow, though only by 5 seconds. Plastow able to take 5 seconds on that pit stop on his own, just like that. It could be a lot of time in the end for Martin de Jong if he can gain a little bit on track here and there as well. This might just be closer than we all expect, I think. Mind you, we got Gaston Meseroni as well in it, just ahead of Nicolas Kukato. About 2.5 seconds. Let's see if they can find in it within themselves to work together, or if it's going to be a bit of an inter-team squabble between the two. And if it is, that's not going to make it. That's not going to make it easier for them to get the better of Barlow, of course, the third man in the trio, so to say. Would be a Mexican standoff for the finale here. 14 minutes of racing still to go here at Monza, as we're waiting just how the strategy is going to look for a number of the drivers regarding that final pit stop. Oh, Meseroni just goes a bit deep into the opening chicane and down towards the Curva Grande. Cody Steek is on his tail. That's Stephen Orrell ahead. Orrell, who would probably like someone ahead of him to just tow him along. Please, mate. Be my guest, go ahead. Patrick Gannon has had a few incidents in this race as well, but I don't think any of these recent ones has been really anything serious. Craig Durant is in the pits alongside Matt Sisseler and Chris Roberts. He as well also just ever so slightly overshoots the pit box there and having to reverse in. That's certainly going to be an annoying one. Remco Barlow still holds the lead now over Martin de Jong, and I wonder what happened to Gaston Maceroni. And how come he's now behind Martin de Jong there? Seem to remember that Maceroni was ahead of de Jong, but we'll have to see here. Gaston Maceroni, what is this type of off track? It's just a, that's just a simple, very small excursion. It might just be me remembering wrong, but Martin de Jong's putting in some decent lap times. Though same has to be said for Remco Barlow. Actually, Martin de Jong, I think, is doing a heavy load of fuel saving at the moment, because he's lost a lot of and he's coming into the pits here. So there was to be no more fuel saving at the end. Maybe he's just realized that he couldn't make it work all the way. Let's see how short of a pit stop he can make it here then. With just over 10 minutes left to go. Ducato's already passed him, of course. Here comes Pete Plastow. And Patrick Gannon. And Gannon might have to do another pit stop. I would expect him to, actually. He was in at lap 29. So with Barlow, Maceroni, yeah, that would be about it, I think. Gannon would need to come in as well. Lon Nielsen, James Foster, and Cody Steek could probably make the fuel last to the end for himself. We'll have to see about that. Stephen Orrell is now in the lead after we've had Alfredo Tricurici in. And it's going to be interesting to follow Stephen Orrell here over the last 9 minutes of this race. Fingers crossed that we won't be seeing that Porsche coming into the pits, because I would love to see a class win for Stephen Orrell here tonight. It would be brilliant indeed. It's been an issue for Tony Fender Linden, who's in 6th now. Here, Gaston Maceroni comes into the pits. And so does Patrick Gannon. This is the final pit stop for Maceroni. Oh, and he overshoots the pit box as well here, just having to back up ever so slightly. The pit lane time for Martin de Jong, who's already passed here, was 11.2 seconds. Here's 12.4, and that's the pit stop time as well, of course. Martin de Jong over a second and a half quicker than Gaston Maceroni altogether, and he'll be well clear of the Argentine driver. Martin de Jong 8.2 seconds down on Pete Plastow, so that's going to be a tough nut to crack. He's gonna just push on, gain the most from it in the end here, I think. We still have to see Remco Barlow come into the pits. And that could be on this lap. He goes a very shallow line through the parabolica, and that usually spells that it's pit entry time, and it is so for Remco Barlow here. With about 7 minutes of racing remaining, it's going to be a splash and dash for the Dutchman. Looking at the pit time, we're going to be comparing that to the pit time of Nicolas Cucato. That's 11 seconds for Barlow gain, and I'm wondering if it's going to be enough. And I think it is. It's going to be enough, and it's going to be well and comfortably enough for Remco Barlow to come out ahead of Nicolas Cucato by a pretty comfortable cushion of what it's going to end up being around 5 seconds, I think. So it's Remco Barlow now leading Nicolas Cucato, and then Pete Plastow further 6.5 seconds down, then 7.5 from him down to Martin de Jong now in 4th place. He's ahead of Gaston Maceroni, then Craig Durand, Patrick Gannon, Charlie Lund-Nielsen, and James Foster with Cody Steek. And 10th place at the moment. We spoke to Cody before the season as well, and he mentioned the fact that it was all about proving to himself and the world that he belongs after having been promoted into the pro ranks after last season. It's gonna be a tough season competitively for anyone in that situation, but Cody Steek aiming for the top 10s, and so far looking to pull them off as well. Certainly looking good here. Stephen Orrell another 13 seconds he has down, so Alfredo Tricarici wonder if it's gonna be enough here. 5 minutes and the gap is just 13 seconds, and you wonder how much fuel he's gonna have to save as well there, Stephen Orrell. Just how much is gonna cost him. That's Matt Sisselin there, who's just stationary, I'm afraid, so that's never nice to see. Here is Pete Plastow in 3rd place. Just looking at the lap times now, he's about half a second off of Nicolas Cucato. Remco Barlow, of course, with that pit out lap on his last lap, so nothing really to count for in that situation. As the minutes tick by, so does the opportunities for the drivers who has to do something here at the late stage of the race. And for some of them, it might just look like the strategy wasn't the best call. This is also about luck, timing the pit stops to perfection with traffic and still comfortably within the limits of actually being able to do it. James Foster in for a very late 4th pit stop. Gets overtaken by Stephen Orrell, who's yet to do his 3rd. It's been a brilliant drive in the Porsche so far. And I think he must be on track for, at least if nothing else, than being very close to making it. With 3 laps, or 3 minutes, left of the race still to do. This all depends on just how the final couple of laps are going to play out for Stephen Orrell. One thing we don't hope we're going to see is that car spluttering all the way along here. 2.5 minutes remaining. It's Remco Barlow. 5.8 seconds clear of Nicolas Cucato. Barlow, though, in a bit of traffic. He's going to clear that before his teammate can do anything. And then further back there, Pete Plastow looking to take a podium position. Tonight, Martin de Jong looking to, well, be knocking on the podium's door, but not quite there for tonight. He's close though. In AM, it is Stephen Orrell leading Alfredo Tricarici, and the gap from Orrell to Tricarici is, what is it now, 9.5 seconds. It's certainly been dropping quickly, but Orrell can afford to go slowly. The question is, can he do so for 1 or for 2 laps at the end here? Because it should be the final one, but we're not quite sure, are we? As Remco Barlow's behind him. As Barlow, well, he pushes through. It's about 6.5 seconds down to Nicolas Cucato now. Another 7 to Pete Plastow, and then Martin de Jong. A minute to get round here, and I wonder if it's gonna be an extended one with a push there on the final lap. 45 seconds here. If not, of course, we are gonna see the checkered flag coming out at the end of this lap if Remco Barlow's not gonna be able to make it to the line here, because we are all the way at the checkered flag, and strategically Remco Barlow has driven a beautiful race, flying under the radar all the way through, then just to come through and to nip it at the very end here. What a brilliant strategic display. It's 10 seconds left, so it is going to be the checkered flag here as Darren Fellows comes into the pits. I think he's under fueled. Cucato's got Chris J. Roberts. And we're going to be following with interest here Stephen Orrell, who lets Remco Barlow through, and I think that means Stephen Orrell is going to take the checkered flag as well. And with that, a brilliant two-stopper for Orrell. Here they are, the two class winners. Remco Barlow of Pro, Stephen Orrell of AM. This is a beautiful shot indeed. And a very good race by both of these drivers, both of them managing their own strategy perfectly to the line. What a win it is for Remco Barlow in the 42 car to really launch his season on a high, and Stephen Orrell as well. Very good result for him. Cucato gets third, or I'm sorry, Cucato though in Pro gets second. Plastow gets third ahead of Martin de Jong, who was probably feeling like that about his race for a while. Gaston Maceroni fifth there ahead of Craig Durant, Patrick Gannon and Charlie Lund Nielsen. I was about to say they were fighting for it to the line, but that was not quite the case, was it? There's Charlie Lund Nielsen. Cody Steeks a bit further back. He was further back there with one of the BMWs. The BMW of Tony van der Linden comes around as well to complete his race. We can see there it is. The checkered flag for Cody Steek, finishing in 9th place in Pro ahead of James Foster. And in AM, it's Orrell ahead of Tricarici and Andy Spicer with Robert van der Heuvel, I'm sorry, and then Tony van der Linden in 5th place. And we're of course gonna go through the class results once we get the final results able to be displayed, and once we get a bit of background funkiness running. Good old Japanese Gran Turismo funk. the best royalty music that I know of. The royalty-free music, that is, of course. Somehow that exists within the realms of something that isn't really copyrighted. And I think I myself, I'm with a lot of content creators out there that's been taking advantage of that over the last few years. Anyway, with that said, I think it's time for the results. And in Pro, Remco Barlow for Coanda Racing takes it ahead of reigning champ and teammate Nicolas Cucato. Pete Plastow gets his first podium of the season with third place ahead of Marc de Jong and Gaston Maceroni, with Craig Durand and Patrick Gannon. Charlie Lund-Nielsen, Cody Steek, James Foster there in 10th place ahead of Chris J. Roberts, Matt Sisseler and Matthew Terry. In AM, well, a brilliant drive from Stephen Orrell to take the win ahead of Alfredo Tricarici and Andy Spicer. Robert van den Heuvel, the Lobster in 4th ahead of Tony van der Linden. Darren Fellows, not quite with the luck he had last time out at Interlagos. Then Bradley Pascoe, Stuart Jacklin, and Baron Glover for Glaspro, who was running so well until he wasn't anymore. A brilliant 90 minutes of racing it's been here from Monza, and I think all we have to do is to get some of the drivers into the interview room. I say, but bear with me for a sec, cause let's see who we can get in here. And one I've been dying to pull in here, Stephen Orr, welcome to the booth, and what a race win! The only driver to successfully two-stop, and I'm thinking that must have been a gargantuan amount of fuel saving coming through on your end.
Yeah, it was. Although I didn't have enough. In the end, I let Remco catch me, pass me, and then I didn't have to do that final lap. I need to get in between him and Alfredo, and it worked perfectly.
Yeah, that was just a piece of beautiful racecraft. It's because as a commentator, you see so many attempts of strategies like this, and so often it falls apart at the very end. And for once, it worked out, and it worked out beautifully for you tonight.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw Remco pitting, I thought he was never going to make it back round again. And it was with just the last lap, he finally got past Alfredo, and that meant I just had to slow down, slot in between, and it worked. I didn't even think about fuel saving until I realised that the first stint was going to be taking me 32 minutes. And I thought, I'm never going to win this, so I may as well start lifting and see how it goes. And it worked brilliantly.
And a very good drive as well to make it through all the carnage of the early lap incidents. How did you see that coming from where you were in the field?
I have no idea. I just went through. I mean, a lot of luck, a bit of skill, and that really helped. That first crash, was it the first lap maybe, on the backstretch, and I got through. Realised the people around me. I think I was second or third by then in amateur class. I just thought, don't make mistakes, see how it goes, and see what happens. And it happened very well in the end. Yeah, thrilled with that.
Well, indeed, Stephen. Thanks for taking the time to have a post-race chat, and congrats on the win, of course. Before we let you go, is there anyone you'd like to give a thanks or a shout-out to?
Robert, as always, and the new guys that have started taking over. And there's one other. Apex Tech Racing, I think. I have never fuel saved in my life, and then I did a spa event with Cody and Andy Spicer, and just a few months ago, whenever the last spa was, and they told me all about fuel saving, and then it paid off in a race. So yeah, thanks to all of those people.
Beautiful indeed. Thank you for joining in, and congrats on the win, Stephen Orrell, and do enjoy it.
Yes, thank you.
So, ladies and gents, that was Stephen Orrell joining in, and I'll just bring in another race winner here now, the race winner of Pro here, and another piece of masterful strategy, just like from Stephen Orrell, the AM winner, Remco Barlow.
Good evening.
A very, very, very chaotic start. Just try to talk me through what happened there on the back straight on that one.
Well, I was fighting with a Audi at first. I'm not sure who it was again. And then we approached Ascari, and then I just let him through, so there would be a crash between us. But when we came through Ascari's, somehow I believe it was Miss Roney that spun. But there was all of mayhem all of a sudden, and I just tried to keep calm and steer my car through it, and I managed to do it and get through. So yeah, I was very lucky, I believe.
and from there on, Remco, it seems like you had that strategic edge over basically everybody else in the race, not only being able to drive a very, very consistent and safe race, but also being able to take a huge chunk of time on everybody else, basically on that last round of pit stops. Was that all in the plan along?
Yes, I saw that almost everyone that was stopping a little bit early, because some people had their first stop that was a little bit shorter than the other pit stops. So I knew that if my last pit stop was faster as theirs, that I would jump them all. And yeah, that happened. And also I had to keep a consistent pace and keep up front. So yeah, to keep everything close. Otherwise, it was the last case, I believe. But yeah, I had the pace, luckily.
Well, a brilliant race on your part, Remco. Congratulations on the win. Thanks for taking the time to have a post-race chat with us here. And before we let you go and celebrate in style, is there anyone you'd like to give a thanks or a shout-out to?
Of course, shout out to the commentators, to Sunday GT Masters, also to Gwanda Racing, of course, my race team within Sunday GT Masters, and a shout out to my other team, WPR Racing, and our Dutch sim racing podcast, Simcraft.
Well, beautiful indeed, Remco. Again, congratulations, and I'll hope to get the chance to speak to you again here soon in the future.
I hope so too. Thank you, Hasse. See ya.
Cheers. So that was Remco Barlow, and we're gonna have a quick. We're gonna have a quick word as well, because I've jumped into the waiting room, which wasn't exactly the plan, but I've done it anyways, and I'm gonna drag with me, screaming and shouting, and probably in anger, Martin de Jong, because I could imagine that he's a frustrated gentleman indeed. Here we have him. Here he is, Martin de Jong. Martin, it looked so good for so long, and then it all came unraveling in a very short space of time indeed. Tell me a little bit more about just what went down out there.
Yeah, first part of the race I was just doing my thing, actually massively fuel saving, which I started with a little bit too late in the first stint to even try and think about only doing 2 stops instead of a splash and dash in the end. And then I was surprised Nicholas was in front of me after the pit stops, but I already had something like, okay, you're doing a slightly different strategy. And I was just really chilling behind him, and yeah, then you saw what happened. I just ran a little bit too wide on the exit of Parabolica. Yeah, and then with full throttle and then too much on the green stuff, the TC fully kicked in, and I lost the rear, couldn't do anything about it anymore. And then also damage. So, not angry or screaming, but yeah, a little bit disappointed. I mean, my qualifying was really, my qualifier was a real flyer. Yeah, and then having it to end like this, and then yeah, a couple of mistakes more, trying to make up some lost time. Yeah, anyway, P4 could have been worse, actually.
And well, speaking of that, 4th place isn't bad in terms of the points haul in the end. Even with the bad luck over the first few rounds here, the opening 2 rounds, do you think you'll still be able to be there and in with a shout for the overall title this season?
I think so. I mean, also, of course, depending on the other guys a bit. We have a couple of real good drivers, quick drivers, which is interesting for me to see where I'm at. I've learned a lot the past year, also running in another big well-known league, and for me it's a real challenge to even step up my game even more.
Well, indeed, Martin, I think it's been clear and evident that the pace is very much there, so I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of you in this season, as we of course have in the past already. Martin, thanks for taking the time to have a bit of a chat with me here post-race before we let you off the hook. Is there anyone that you'd like to give a thanks or a shout-out to?
Yeah, thanks for whole organization again, for hosting the great series. Happy to be here again. Just unlucky to miss first round. Also with the incorrect car registered for me by a friend, but yeah, it happened. And also great thanks to you guys, the broadcast again. And for the rest, thanks to everybody, and I wish everyone good luck for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, and best of luck to you as well, mate, and hope for a bit of a reversal of the fortunes for the next race in 2 weeks. Ladies and gents, that was Martin de Jong and the last interviewee of the night. With that said, that's going to be the last of me as well. My name is Hasse Rømer. I was joined by the brilliant Ed May for as long as I had the pleasure of it. He, of course, did have to leave us because of circumstances that are circumstances. Anyways, it'll be 2 weeks before we are back here on Virtual Racing Compound. So until then, I bid you all a lovely Sunday evening. Do take care, and until next time, bye-bye.